Chapter 12, Education Reform. Welcome, Senator Ressler and Senator Broomer. Secretary Shin will join you for lunch in just a few minutes. He's returning from the historic keynote speech he delivered at the NEA Representative Assembly. Thank you. We will wait for him right here. The aide left them alone in the waiting room. Senator Broomer smiled broadly. Can you imagine such a thing? Harold Shin, the Secretary of Education? There was a time when powerful voices in Washington pronounced him the most dangerous man teaching American history. Now he's a Secretary of Education and NEA keynote speaker in Washington, D.C. With a knowing expression, Senator Ressler intoned, there exists in the first 100 days the possibility to change anything. The presidential campaign slogan that seemed to resonate most with people was, a time for change. She believes this is finally the time for real and lasting change. Just then the secretary burst in the room with a smile and extended hand. Senator Ressler, Senator Broomer, good to see you. He shook each of the hands vigorously. I have to tell you, the experience of speaking in the National Education Association was exhilarating. Then he paused. If it weren't for the booth full of creationists passing out the propaganda on the exhibition floor, it would have been a perfect day. Visibly shaking it off, he continued. Be that as it may, please join me in my office for lunch so we can discuss better things to come. Hope you're hungry. I am famished. After the meal was served and they'd moved beyond customary genialities, Senator Ressler spoke up. Mr. Secretary, what do you believe are the first steps towards true change in America? Well, I believe a multicultural mandate has been conferred on us in this election. In order to bring about the kind of change required for a truly multicultural society, we must impart a new vision for the children of America. Senator Broomer seemed puzzled. Mr. Secretary, it seems like public schools have had the opportunity to do this for over 60 years. What will be different this time to effect the needed change? Well, we must bring private schools into the fold. Pardon me? Yes. Private schools are the last barrier to multiculturalism. Children educated in these moral equivalents of the Sharia schools are the least open to multicultural values. Senator Broomer is having difficulty following the train of thought. Are you saying that all private schools are like Muslim fundamentalist schools? Aren't there many secular private schools? Virtually all private schools teach what are properly labeled conservative values. Until we have a liberal respect for the many cultural traditions of the world, we will continue to have cultures in conflict. That is the reason the world is at war. Senator Ressler is getting impatient with private seminar on multiculturalism. Mr. Secretary, what do you believe is the first step we should take towards realizing the President's vision for education reform? Well, we need a unified foundation for science curriculum. Senator Broomer was taken aback. Science? I thought your academic focus was on American history. Why science? Well, by definition, with American history, you deal with the history of America. With science, you deal with the history of the world, and indeed the universe. Clearly, the question of origins is the single most foundational concept of any culture. Most scientists now recognize that the previous administration had, among other wars, conducted a war on science. It is now time to reverse the damage. Until we purge the polarizing notion that men are created in the image of God, we will never realize a truly multicultural world at peace. Senator Broomer was still not satisfied. Sounds like religion to me. How does this relate to science? The secretary's smile broadened as his eyes narrowed. The authority of science is virtually unquestioned. The evolutionary paradigm has unified the rest of the world, but because America has rejected it, we are at risk of losing our leadership role in higher education. Still, because of the increasing power of science in the public mind, there should be very little resistance to a new academic standard in the form of science graduation requirements. This standard should include a graded mastery requirement in evolutionary principles at every level, primary through secondary, public and private. Okay, do you have a plan to achieve such a goal? Asked Broomer. Clearly, the influence of creationism in America has been long and deep. A recent Newsweek poll indicated that 90% of Americans believe in a creator, and 60% still believe the biblical account of creation happened a few thousand years ago. Yet there is evidence that we are on the threshold of a metaphysical sea change. Significant Fundamentalist leaders are indicating a readiness to embrace the modern scientific age. Specifically, they are ready to accept an evolutionary origin for the universe, including billions of years. Again, Senator Broomer was concerned. Does the time frame really matter to them? I thought that creationists were flexible on this matter. Isn't the real issue biological evolution? The secretary is quick to respond. That's a common misunderstanding of the history of modern science. Many imagine Charles Darwin came out of nowhere, published The Origin of Species, and the rest was history. The fact is that the first cracks in the creationist foundation were formed when a new history of the earth replaced the Bible's account. While on a voyage to the Galapagos Islands, Darwin's theory was actually inspired by his reading of Charles Lyell's book, Principles of Geology. You see, Lyell's strategy was to overthrow the Genesis account of history by arguing for an earth that was millions of years older than the Bible allowed. Darwin merely formulated evolution as a logical implication of an ancient universe haunted by suffering, pain, and death. That is what finally led to the principle of survival of the fittest. Senator Broomer asks, so what evidence do you have that fundamentalists are embracing the evolution of the universe? Again, the secretary was enthused. Undersecretary Dewey Pullman has just brokered a textbook deal that assumes full acceptance of the Big Bang and all the evolutionary implications for the origin of the universe. A leading fundamentalist spokesperson has not only offered his endorsement, but actually proposed the plan. Conservative publishers have offered to implement the proposal. The original plan was to have religious endorsements sell these ideas in public schools. Now, with a new academic standard, we can effectively require this new series of textbooks for all schools, both public and private. This with the full support of the most conservative, religious, and political leaders in America. This is a very significant step forward. Senator Ressler was ready for the next step. This is excellent news, Mr. Secretary. Now we need to address the remaining issue, biological evolution. Any thoughts on this matter? Yes, this is clearly needed, but it is also very challenging. The so-called intelligent design theory has breathed new life into old creationism. Now, those in this movement try to distance themselves from creationism, but everyone knows where they're going with this. In fact, the very conservative religious leaders we just mentioned have retreated from a literal interpretation of the book of Genesis only because they believe this is a more defensible position. However, I believe that intelligent design may be their Alamo. The eyes of Senator Broomer widen. So, what do you have in mind? What we need is another Scopes monkey trial, but this time in reverse. Oh yeah, my son did a school report on the movie Inherit the Wind. Spencer Tracy was brilliant as the defense attorney for Scopes. I thought the movie was fascinating and informative, but a classmate later told him there was a fictional version of the trial. Is that true? Well, yeah, they never claimed the movie was a documentary. What matters were the results. America began its retreat from creationism during that time by means of a little poetic license. Oh, yeah, sure, I understand. Now, I assume you've heard of the new advocate of intelligent design and his theory of coded junk DNA. This elder from the Bible Belt of the University of Alabama seems to be the last fundamentalist holdout in Southern academia. Mr. Secretary, said Senator Ressler, I believe that I have a useful contact for you. Dr. Michael Richardson does consulting work for the NAS to advance the teaching of evolution in both secondary and post-secondary education. He is a philosopher of science with a particular interest and experience with religious schools. He actually attended a noted religious school in Southern California. He was a celebrated graduate of that school and was expected to go on to ministry. He then went on to Glendale College, where he appears that he finally learned some science. He soon became an ardent evolutionist and anti-creationist. One of my aides made me aware of his recent work consulting for the University of Alabama. You see, the UA had a legal battle with a couple of professors, Dr. Tom Johnson and his close friend, Dr. William Elder. After this, Richardson worked with the UA to institute a set of policy standards now used to ensure professors don't undermine the reputation of their institution. With the politics surrounding research funding, 58% from the federal government, creationism is seen as a real black eye for Southern schools trying to shake off old stereotypes. Well, yes, he does sound interesting, and his background should be very useful. There is one problem. From his writings, it's clear that Richardson has traded one notion of absolute truth, Christianity, for another, science. I'm not sure that your postmodern approach will set well with this particular modernist. Senator Shin reflected. Absolutism is always a concern, but in this case, it shouldn't present a problem. By definition, modernism is a precursor to any postmodern culture, and really, the majority ends up there anyway. That said, I should suggest you contact him rather than I. Senator Broomer looked like a child at the deep end of the pool. How does any of this relate to science? Secretary Shin appeared amused. One of my favorite philosophers of science, Paul Feyerabend, carried the current interest in paradigms to its logical end. He compared modern science to an aging boxer, obsessed with his own press clippings, making claims far beyond his ability to deliver. According to Feyerabend, science has become an oppressive ideology, even though it started as a liberation movement. He maintained that a multicultural society should be protected from the control of science, just as it is protected from any oppressor. People should be free to choose any means of reaching truth, however they choose to define it. Senator Russell picked up the conversation before Broomer could question further. Mr. Secretary, as you know, we are on the Commerce Committee chaired by Senator Paul Field, who has called a Senate hearing on potential NIH funding for Dr. Elder's research. It also appears that Field has an axe to grind with the President's plan to fully fund stem cell research. Yes, I'm very aware of this situation, and this may well be the very opportunity we're looking for. There is a great deal of public support for stem cell research. All we have to do is show how opposition to stem cell research is really a lack of compassion for suffering people. It shouldn't be hard to show that the only thing standing in the way is creationism. Senator Broomer jumped in again before he could get cut off. Yes, compassion, just like in Inherit the Wind. That fundamentalist pastor was so heartless to his daughter. But what exactly does creationism have to do with stem cell research? Senator Ressler was peeved. It has to do with a pro-life love affair with a fetus. The secretary feigned a tone of understanding. They actually believe that life begins at conception, and so embryonic stem cell research is a form of abortion. They also believe that God is opposed to changing the original created kind embodied in human DNA. For them, all such work will end with mutants and chimeras. Senator Broomer paused. Chimeras? The secretary came back. Yes, in Greek mythology, the chimera is a creature made of the parts of multiple animals, like the Hydra that Hercules defeated. Senator Broomer still did not seem to be following. The secretary tried to coax him along. Do you remember The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells? Oh yes, I saw that movie back when I was in high school. Burt Lancaster was perfect as the cold, logical scientist. Okay then, in modern biology, the DNA of plants, animals, and even humans can actually be combined. One way is to physically mix cells from two independent zygotes, that is, fertilized eggs, and let them grow into cell cultures for stem cell research and other purposes. Senator Broomer mused, isn't that all just science fiction? No one's actually doing this with humans, are they? Well, actually, chimeras are not uncommon in genetic research, and as for human chimeras, there have been a number of little-known experiments completed successfully. They include the combination of human DNA with cow eggs, sheep eggs, and even rabbit eggs for stem cell research. Senator Brewer looked worried. Surely there are legal limits to this sort of thing. The secretary took a tone of assurance. Yes, surely. That is why the president has prompted a select Senate committee to study what it really means to be a human being. They hope to create a new value system for life that is more flexible than biblical literalism allows. The result of this effort should guide bioethicists well into the future. Someday, creationist fears about genetic engineering will be seen as the moral equivalent of their discredited notion of the fixity of the species. Senator Ressler summarized their meeting. In a meeting I had with the president last week, she said this is finally time to turn back the anti-science policies of the previous administration. As you know, she now expresses faith in the power of progressive human spirituality, and so she has been working to enlist religious and scientific leaders to achieve her vision for worldwide unity through the coming bicentennial Darwin Day celebration. To that end, she has employed the resources of Intercon, an intercontinental network of public relations firms. She has asked that I ensure that the minister who organized this event and who has written extensively on the compassion of government-funded stem cell research be included in our plans. As she said, one clergyman with a backward collar is worth dozens of scientists any day. The president has summarized her hope for the future by saying, "We will finally see change we can believe in when we unite America with the world through a synthesis of science and spirituality." Secretary Shin concluded, "Through evolution, we may finally rewrite the oppressed people's history of the world."